Greetings all and welcome to Dave's Craft Room, and on today's video we're making a crumb quilt. Okay, it's time for us to dig into Mount Scrapmore and use some of our scraps because Mount Scrapmore is getting out of hand. What are we gonna make with it? Yesterday when I was binge watching YouTube videos, I landed on one on a channel called the Fabric Patch. They have a crumb quilt video tutorial using a panel, and I realized that I have the perfect panel for this quilt. It's this panel. So we're gonna make a wildlife jungle theme quilt, which is perfect because we can use all of my brown and like dark green and that stuff color of fabric, which is good because I'm not usually drawn to that fabric. It doesn't usually get used. So we're gonna dig through Mount Scrapmore, pull all of our brown fabric, and this is basically the idea. We're gonna make some crumb strips, and then we're gonna use the strips to log cabin these blocks to make bigger blocks and then sew them together. I also have this panel, which is pretty striking, and it might make it in, I'm not sure. And then I have this one, this panel, a huge lion. I definitely want to put this giant lion in. I just am not sure exactly how I'm gonna do it because I want to have the whole lion. I might cut him out and applique him on. I might piece him in and have cut the sky out and just have him there I don't know, we'll see when we get to that stage. Now, many quilters make crumb quilts and they use their scraps to make quilts. There's kind of a paradox in quilting because it seems like the more quilts you make, the more scraps you have. Even when you're using those scraps to make the quilt. It seems like if I make the quilt, I should have less scraps. So I'm curious to see whether this quilt even makes a dent. Matter of fact, I think I'm gonna weigh it. I'm gonna stand on the scale, hold in Mount Scrapmore bin before and after, and see whether I even made any dent at all. I really don't use brown very often. But that being said, I probably will go into my stash as well because I have brown and greens in there that I don't really have any of the use for. I also have charms, so I'm gonna pull all the brown charms. And full disclosure, I was in the fabric store today, and yes, I surely did buy some fabric just for this, but I thought it was perfect and I had to. It's kind of jungly. So the first things first, I'm gonna weigh Mount Scrapmore. This is Mount Scrapmore. So the Mount Scrapmore weighs 17.2 pounds. Now we're gonna pull the fabric. I'm not gonna weigh it again until the very, very end because there's no guarantee I'll use everything I pull. And we're gonna see, I suspect, I'm gonna say this right now, I might use probably less than 5 pounds, probably 3 pounds at most, 3 pounds of fabric. So that's not a big dent. So let's pull.
So I'm just sorting through the scraps, and I eventually dump out the bin and set aside everything that's green or brown, basically the colors you'd find in a jungle, and then everything else goes back in the bin. I liked doing this because I got the chance to see everything that was in there, a lot of stuff that I completely forgot about. The next step is to iron all the big pieces that are approximately fat quarter sized, and I'm going to use those for my first of 2 methods of crumb piecing. In the first method, I take the large scraps and I cut them into strips. I cut the widths of the strips randomly, although the lines are all parallel. I put those into a pile so I can select them at random, and then I sew them back up, and then I cut the new stripped panels into more strips. The second method is the adding machine tape. This is the method I use for the small scraps. If they're really tiny, I sew them together until they're big enough to sew onto the adding machine tape. I piece 18-inch long crumb strips.
How am I gonna do this? I have a vision, but I don't know the techniques.
What I do next is I take the strips I have, whether it's the ones that I pieced from fat quarters or the adding machine tape ones, and I log cabin the small blocks. Actually, more accurately, I courthouse step the blocks. In a log cabin, you sew a strip onto one side and then iron it and sew one onto the next side. In a courthouse step block, you sew strips onto either side, iron both sides, and then sew 2 more strips onto both of the other sides. So in that way, you're doing 2 at a time and it grows faster. Either way, the final block will be so busy that you can't hardly tell how it was pieced. Eventually, I realized that I could chain piece the blocks, and that moved a lot faster. Initially, I'm not concerned about making sure the blocks are a perfect square or rectangle, but ultimately I square them all to the same size, I think 14 inches. Now we get to the lion, and what I decided to do for him is I cut him out, leaving enough edge around him to turn the edge over, and then I machine applique him onto a crumb pieced background. I will eventually piece the whole panel into the quilt.
Alright, so this is the layout that I am happy with. I realize that I'm gonna have to do partial seams, but I will cross that bridge later. For now, we need to fill in some of the empty space. And for that, I have, these are the panels from these are like, I guess, blocks from the panel that I didn't use because I didn't think they were as stunning, but they can go around the edge along with these. These are more adding machine paper crumb strips. So I'm gonna whip this up into, so that it fills the empty spaces, and then we'll assemble the quilt. We'll make a plan at that point. Alright, so we're fully pieced up to here. And from here, the only thing to do is put it together by partial seams. So, I think the thing to do is I'm gonna sew this seam to there, and then I sew this onto there all the way up, because this is already sewed together, so all the way up. So let me do this. I think I can do it.
I'm hand quilting it with big stitch embroidery floss quilting, and I'm doing vertical lines just like trees in the forest. I've pulled all of my brown and dark green embroidery floss, which just like the fabric doesn't get used very much. I moved the coffee table out of the way and do it on my living room floor while I watched Netflix at night. I think it took me 4 days, and this is the final result. I used some of the crumbs to piece a crumb binding, and it turned out stunning. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned. We're gonna weigh Mount Scrapmore again, and keep in mind my prediction.
I might use probably less than 5 pounds, probably like 3 pounds at most, 3 pounds of fabric. Alright, so we're done with the quilt, and these are the scraps that I originally pulled and did not use. So they go back into the scrap bin. Okay, these are charms. They did not come from the scrap bin. I'm gonna stand on the scale while I hold this and then see the difference in weight, if there is any difference. So now I subtract my own weight. 14.2. So that's 3 pounds. We used 3 pounds exactly. 3 pounds. That's actually pretty decent. I think I guesstimated under 5 pounds. That's technically right. You know, the issue is that in Dave's craft room, there are so many quilts and there is so much fabric. Even as I pull from it, I think overall, I contribute more than I pull. For example, let me weigh it again next week and we'll probably be back up to 17 pounds. That's my suspicion. The only way to not grow your stash is to not buy more fabric. And I'm unwilling to do that, so the Mount Scrapmore will continue to grow and expand. She has gotten out of hand though. So I guess we need to make more scrap quilts. So that will be coming soon, I guess. But anyway, that's all for today's video. The jungle quilt turned out fantastic. I love it. And we'll see you next time.